Dear guests, dear friends, I cannot be physically with you today as I will be in Italy for the official launch of the PES Youth Plan, but I would like to give you my strong personal support for the important initiative you are taking part to, and therefore I send you this message. As one of the youngest members of the European Parliament, I strongly support projects such as yours, because initiatives targeting young people and their access to the labour market must be promoted and sustained, and this one is an excellent example. So let me thank Solidar for the passionate commitment you are expressing today, as well as for our lasting fruitful collaboration. I would also like to thank the participants of the Negotiate project. Your work is fundamental for us in order to build a solid basis to our political proposals. Just looking at the old continent, it is clear that we are facing a time of serious dangers, where disruptive forces try to undermine the European project. The migration crisis and Brexit, as well as the evolving situation in countries such as Hungary, put us in front of unprecedented challenges. However, they come as the result of an economic crisis that left 7 out of 10 families poorer than before. It has been calculated that almost 70 years of economic progress have been cancelled by the crisis. Youngsters were the target group that suffered the most, and indeed they were stolen their power to build their own future. They were marginalized and they felt marginalized. The results of the Brexit referendum are in this sense very important. As we know, among those young people who voted, Remain was the dominant choice. However, a vast majority of young people decided not to take part to the referendum, feeling that they could not make a difference through their vote and that neither Remain nor Leave option could determine a real positive change in their lives. Results from the recent Eurobarometer survey on European youth, published in May 2016, are also very meaningful and tend to confirm my impression. This survey was conducted among over 10,000 young Europeans, aged 16 to 30, in the 28 member states. More than half of young people in Europe have the impression that in their country, youth has been marginalized and excluded from economic and social life by the crisis. This amounts to 57% of the participants to the survey. An absolute majority of respondents feel excluded in 20 countries. True, there are wide national differences and divergences of up to 66 points. Unsurprisingly, the rates are very high in those countries which were worst affected by the crisis, and with high youth unemployment rates. At the European level, an absolute majority of young people, 59%, say that their national education system is well adapted to the current world of work, but these respondents are particularly likely to be people in countries where the youth feel least left out of economic life. However, in 9 countries where there is a majority for a negative answer to this question, there is a majority, and a large majority of young Europeans, 61%, does not want to study, undergo training, nor work in another EU country, while only 32% would like to do so. Across the EU as a whole, 88% of young people aged 16 to 30 years have never traveled to another EU country to study or work. Those results could be easily interpreted and used in order to improve EU programs and funding for the EU in 2 clear directions. On one side, we have to put in place a more in-depth discussion on economically sustainable and socially protected youth mobility across the EU. On the other side, access to the labour market and transition to new working models has to be continued and fostered, with a big attention to social protection. A breakthrough within mobility schemes was recently made with the approval of the regulation for the reform of EURES, the European platform for the matching of demand and supply in the European labour market. Thanks to targeted resources and to the attempt to better coordinate and exchange information, the measure is intended to facilitate the movement of young people within the Union's labour market. Clearly, EU's competence in this area is limited, given the broad powers of nation-state on employment policies. However, a space for European labour policy exists and can be crucial, for example, in the fight against social dumping. In this regard, the recent initiative by the Commission to reform the Posting of Workers Directive could make an important contribution, and the Parliament will follow this legislative file very carefully. The mid-term review of Erasmus Plus programme has also been a topic of wide interest, and I'm glad that the collaboration with youth representatives has been very fruitful to improve the program. On the other side, as already mentioned, access to the labour market in the country of residence and a more balanced situation across the EU remain a core issue for European policymakers, as well as national and local authorities. In this sense, the Youth Employment Initiative, and especially the Youth Guarantee schemes, constitute a concrete answer that the centre-left, and especially PES, ES and SD have endorsed. The political aim of this programme, as you all know, is to provide youth below the age of 25 and 30 in some countries an offer of a quality job, further education, an apprenticeship or a traineeship within 4 months after becoming unemployed or leaving the formal education system. It is a European scheme that can particularly facilitate the transition of young people from education to employment, or from a position of inactivity to reintegration into a cycle of education. The programme has received some criticism, particularly with regard to its functioning nationally, for some observers excessively based on the experience of North European countries and therefore difficult to apply to other countries' labour markets, which are structurally and demographically more complex. As to its concrete impact, the assessment is necessarily also multifaceted, due to great discrepancies to be found between regions, in addition to excessive bureaucratic mechanisms and inadequate capacity of job centres to absorb all demands. Limits, however, should be read, in my opinion, in a positive way, because they clearly outline the areas in which we still need to invest in order to strengthen our administrative apparatuses. As amply evidenced by the European Commission in the recent impact assessment and first evaluation of the programme, the Youth Guarantee has now become a driving force to improve the transition from school to work and to reduce youth unemployment. The first positive results in this sense are now evident. Of course, there is still room for improvement, increased flexibility in project design, streamlined administrative procedures and operational programs, improvement of the quality and inclusiveness of the projects themselves would facilitate the strengthening of the scheme. The Youth Guarantee should not be considered as a structural policy, yet it still can improve employability of the European young people, given current circumstances. This is the key factor that enabled the European Commission to come forward with a proposal of further investment, both in the MFF review and in 2017 general budget. The European Parliament already confirmed its position as strongest defendant of young people's rights to quality employment and of the need to ensure proper funding of EU schemes. We are now waiting for the Council position, which is, as usual, the most difficult part. Rumours allow us to be a little worried. Last spring, during the EP plenary session, Commissioner Thyssen presented the latest estimates measured at EU level, signalling some quite encouraging data, which however need to be interpreted very cautiously, given the still weak state of health of the Union after long years of crisis and recession. Young unemployed people in Europe today amount to 4.3 million, a reduction of 25% compared to December 2012. Unemployment rates are also improving, reaching 19.1% in March 2016, compared with 23% of February 2013. Despite problems, we were successful, and this is why EU support should be renewed. Besides YEI, the Youth Employment Initiative, and the Youth Guarantee, of course, structural measures should also be put in place to allow an effective optimization of the functioning of the labour market at the European level, as the one proposed by the Minister of the Italian government, Piercarlo Padoan, a common unemployment insurance scheme for the Eurozone. Surely an important proposal that would not only be a measure of social equity, but would also have positive macroeconomic effects, allowing the containment of the severity of the crisis, exerting a powerful anti-cyclical function and stabilizing the economy. Not to mention that by strengthening solidarity among member states and by harmonizing protection levels, an important step forward could be taken on the path of European integration and to the adoption of a common economic policy, representing the ideal complement to tax and public investment policies. However, in order to really provide a lasting solution to EU internal recovery, a more decisive change and a new long-term oriented way of working of the European fiscal policy is required. A change that cannot be separated from a deeper integration of European countries. A greater integration which should realistically start from initiative adopted by Eurozone member states, so that also structural imbalances of the single currency could be efficiently addressed. Automatic stabilizers, substantial investment plans, flexibility as a structural element and not just a contingent permission, a sharper fight to social and fiscal dumping. These are pieces of the puzzle of an alternative European policy which can give back to youth a perspective of professional and personal growth. On this remark, I will stop myself and leave the floor to your other distinguished guests by thanking Solidar once again for our strict cooperation and by wishing you fruitful discussions today. Enjoy your day and see you soon. Thank you, everybody.